Joining us now, Gordon Chang, author of Nuclear Showdown, North Korea Takes on the World. Gordon, always good to see you, sir.
Great to see you, Leland.
Apt to have you, because North Korea really is taking on the world here. We don't know whether Kim Jong-un watches CNN or perhaps Fox News, if you're watching, hello, or BBC, but he almost certainly heard what President Trump just said in that soundbite yesterday when he was leaving church. He hears that. What does he think?
Well, I think that Kim Jong-un says it doesn't really matter because the United States, in fact, has not imposed any cost on North Korea that they can't bear. And the other thing is that they're probably looking at Moscow and Beijing and thinking that the Chinese and the Russians very well may have their back. Also, he knows that Xi Jinping, the Chinese ruler, is in the run-up to the 19th Communist Party Congress. He's preoccupied about consolidating his power. So it's unlikely that Xi Jinping is actually going to pay too much attention to Kim, except we know that Xi will support the North Koreans in the Security Council, as they're already doing at this very moment.
Well, in a sense, might Kim Jong-un be correct that the Russians and the Chinese have his back, as much in the sense that it kind of occupies the United States from either taking on China as it comes to trade or taking on Russia as it comes to their adventures in the former Soviet bloc?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the Chinese actually like this dynamic, at least on the short term, because they know that every time that North Korea does something provocative, we believe that we need Beijing's help. We send a high envoy to China, and we stop talking about those things that are important to us, like South China Sea, cyber attacks, predatory trade practices, you name it. So, you know, Kim Jong-un has understood this dynamic. His father did. You know, they have developed this pattern of behavior, and they know that the Chinese and the Russians, either together or one by one, will support North Korea against the United States and our friends and partners.
This struck me as particularly poignant because so often people refer to Kim Jong-un as a madman or he's crazy. In a way, he's very calculating. This from General Bob Scales in the Wall Street Journal. This regime has been in power for almost 70 years and understands the value of the long game. Mr. Kim wants to play nuclear blackmail. It's evil, it's dangerous, it's potentially catastrophic, but it isn't unpredictable. And in that sense, are we looking at this too much from a Western standpoint of what Kim wants is regime survival and to ensure regime survival rather than what Kim says he wants, which is to reunify the Korean Peninsula with force?
You know, that's an excellent point, Leland, because, you know, as you say, we look at this and say, well, why do we want our nukes? Well, we want them for deterrence. We're not going to use them in an offensive capability. But Kim Jong-un, we got to remember that the core goal of his regime is the destruction of the South Korean state. And I'm concerned that when Kim becomes confident in his arsenal, he's going to blackmail the United States to break our mutual defense treaty with South Korea and get our 28,500 servicemen and women off the peninsula so that he can then take over South Korea. That's when he miscalculates. That's when this gets extremely dangerous. And a lot of Western analysts don't see it that way. You know, the Kims tell us exactly what they want to do, and we're just oblivious to this.
Well, you know, I was going to follow up and ask you what my dad asked me yesterday, which is, should we be worried? But after that answer, I think we can skip the answer and just go with yes. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Leland.
All right, good to see you.
The U.S. envoy to the United Nations says Washington's patience with North Korea is not unlimited. Nikki Haley made the comments during an emergency Security Council meeting earlier. It appeared to end in deadlock as the U.S. dismissed possible plans for de-escalating the crisis.
The U.S. has threatened North Korea once again, saying that Kim Jong-un is begging for war.
To the members of the Security Council, I must say enough is enough. Nuclear powers understand their responsibilities. Kim Jong-un shows no such understanding. His abusive use of missiles and his nuclear threats show that he is begging for war. War is never something the United States wants. We don't want it now. But our country's patience is not unlimited.
Ambassador Haley's comments are nothing new. Even yesterday, Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis said that the U.S. would use any means necessary to defend itself from North Korea. The U.S. has been threatening military action for weeks now, and the rhetoric has been growing even stronger ever since Trump promised to respond to North Korea with fire and fury. Thankfully, it doesn't go beyond this exchange of threats. However, it's worth mentioning that Washington is yet to provide a viable solution, except for sanctions, which have proven to be ineffective for the past decade or so. Russia and China, however, in contrast, have asked for dialogue with North Korea.
A comprehensive settlement to the nuclear and other issues plaguing the Korean Peninsula can be arrived at solely through political and diplomatic channels. We reiterate our readiness to help this process via the implementation of the initiative proposed by Russia and China.
China and Russia have proposed an initiative for the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. It is practical and feasible and aimed at easing the tensions and preventing further escalation.
Russia and China have proposed the Double Freeze initiative, which would require North Korea to stop its nuclear and ballistic missile tests in return for the U.S. and South Korea to stop its military drills. This is a move that Washington considers to be offensive.
The idea that some have suggested a so-called freeze for freeze is insulting. When a rogue regime has a nuclear weapon and an ICBM pointed at you, you do not take steps to lower your guard. No one would do that. We certainly won't.
It seems that as of now, the situation is in a deadlock, at least until the U.S. decides that threats and sanctions are counterproductive to the situation, if they ever do.
Well, to delve further into this, Rene Carayol, a political analyst and author, joins me live now on the programme. You're very welcome. So it does look like there's an impasse over the Korean crisis, to say the least here. What comes next? Can it be peacefully resolved?
We must always believe that it can be, but this is brinkmanship of the worst sort. What we can't seem to separate is the global rivalry of the big three, of Russia, China and America. That seems to be getting in the way. At this moment, we've got the lone wolf of North Korea. The rest of everyone else needs to be aligned and hunt in packs. It's through that alignment, through that collaboration, then we can see a change in circumstances. But it's all getting a little bit too muscular. And I think it's the global rivalry that's getting in the way of an alignment.
Is that why you think Washington has been so dismissive then of the plan proposed by Russia and China?
Because it's proposed by Russia and China. I wonder if that was proposed by, let's say, Germany, France and the UK, whether they'd be so dismissive. I doubt it.
There's big fears now over what happens next, of course. How likely is Washington to carry out its threat of military action against Pyongyang, in your view?
If you'd asked me yesterday, I would have said highly unlikely. Today, I just think unlikely. It's dangerous times at the moment. However, we must always think that common sense will prevail. But we do need the big three aligned, speaking with one voice, and then sanctions can have an effect. Until then, let's hope that dialogue works.
Do you think that President Trump's bellicose Twitter rhetoric, for example, has worsened this situation? Fire and fury, he said in statements, and also on Twitter, statements like that. Does that worsen what is happening here?
I've yet to see any one of his Twitter messages be a force for good. No, this is dangerous diplomacy in 140 characters. It has no upside whatsoever.
What about the other nations in all this? South Korea, Japan. What reaction can we expect from them? How alarmed do you think that they are by Washington's comments?
Hugely alarmed. 10 million people living in Seoul now. This is not a great moment for them. It's not a great moment for the Japanese. But let's hope that common sense will prevail. The Americans, we're hearing some Nikki Haley is about as tough as I've heard her. I'm not sure she can get any tougher. I think this is about the limit. What I'm hoping, what I think we'll see, is a coming together of Russia, China, United Nations, and common sense will prevail.
North Korea, though, says that it has tested a hydrogen bomb. Would they use it if they're backed into a corner and see themselves as having no other choice, do you think?
The first rule of any negotiation is never back your rival, your opponent, into a corner. Things become unpredictable and uncontrollable then. However, the North Koreans are not stupid. They do throw their hand, they do play their hand well, and they play it strong. This is uncharted territory for everyone. I'm not sure we need any more gambling. I think we need cool heads, and let's remember, collaboration is the new leadership. It's time for alignment, not for more poker playing, not for more muscular activities, and certainly no more tweeting.
The views of political analyst René Curiol. Thank you.
Washington says it will use any means necessary to defend itself after the most powerful North Korean nuclear test to date. The White House says that it could potentially include using its own nuclear capabilities.
President Trump reaffirmed the commitment of the United States to defending our homeland, territories and allies, using the full range of diplomatic, conventional and nuclear capabilities at our disposal.
We have many military options, and the President wanted to be briefed on each one of them. Any threat to the United States or its territories, including Guam, or our allies, will be met with a massive military response, a response both effective and overwhelming.
So it's actually kind of an unexpected and drastic change in tone coming from Mattis there, who's really starting to sound more like Trump. Now, he did add that America is not seeking the annihilation of North Korea, but it's highly unlikely that those comments will be of any comfort to anyone in North Korea, given how quickly his stance changed from there's always the possibility of a diplomatic solution to we don't want to kill you, but we certainly can if need be. Now, these statements are made even more ominous given comments made by President Trump before he met with Mattis and the other generals.
Mr. President, will you attack North Korea?
Earlier on Sunday, Trump did tweet that all options are being considered when it comes to North Korea, but it is clear that the military option seems to be becoming the favorite for the Trump administration. Meanwhile, we have China and Russia urging all sides to show restraint, but it seems that Team Trump is going to stick with the aggressive rhetoric that we've seen from the president as of late.
They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen. North Korea better get their act together, or they're going to be in trouble like few nations ever have been in trouble in this world. Okay? And this man will not get away with what he's doing, believe me.
And this has really already escalated past just a war of words. We've already seen America bolster their military presence in the region and continue to conduct drills with South Korea, much to the displeasure of their northern neighbors. And Trump has gotten a fair amount of backlash for some of his aggressive comments, both here at home and abroad. But the U.S. State Department, for their part, has defended his comments, saying that it's simply the only way to communicate with the North Korean leader.
He exacerbating the president spoke to him, to Kim Jong-un, in a language that Secretary Tillerson has said and said this morning, in the kind of language that Kim Jong-un will understand.
But clearly, America really has no plans of changing their tactics. But despite the fact that all of their aggressive rhetoric and saying that talking will not work and attacking North Korea has only led to further threats from North Korea and more missile tests. But Washington seems unwilling to change their plan of action, pushing the whole world closer to the edge of war.
Jacqueline Vuga reporting there. Well, since Pyongyang's nuclear test, South Korea conducted a snap military drill in response. Seoul says it simulated a strike on the North's nuclear testing site, and missiles were fired from the ground and also fired from fighter planes, and they reportedly hit their intended targets in the Sea of Japan. Well, in another development there, South Korea's Environment Ministry has now approved the deployment of the American-made THAAD missile defence system. It was partly delivered back in March, but it later turned out that the necessary environmental checks were not carried out and the deployment was delayed. However, it seems to have been accelerated now concerning a number of countries in the region. China, for instance, has said that it does fall within the range of the system. We got expert opinion on the tension on the Korean Peninsula.
I think the Trump administration is painting itself into a corner. So, for instance, Trump recently tweeted that talks are not the answer. And so that just leaves the option of threatening North Korea, which only encourages North Korea to accelerate its nuclear weapons program, which in turn encourages the Trump administration to up the ante on its threats. So it's a very dangerous moment. Korean Central News Agency just recently came out with a statement saying that they're not willing to give up their nuclear weapons program unless the United States drops its hostile policy. So there's a definite opening for a diplomatic move if the United States wanted to take that.
This is a full-scale diplomatic crisis, and I think our president has not really framed this issue as such. I think this is in some ways a war of words. We know he's very fond of Twitter and saying provocative things. Our president and our government is not devoting the resources, the political will that are needed to find a solution to this problem. We need to amp up the resources at the State Department. Warm bodies, people who understand North Korea, the culture, the language, get them working on this issue.